I'm Kristy Cox. I am 47 years old. I'm a mom. I'm an accountant. um, I'm kind of like an artsy person, a do-it-yourself type person. I don't like to pay people to do stuff. Typically, I like to try to do stuff myself. Um, but other than that, my life is pretty much the gym.
So what got you into the world of fitness initially?
A lot of it is like people being critical of me when I was a kid, like you're not strong enough, um, your legs are a little chunky, kind of things like that. It kind of made me want to like figure out how to fix those things that people kind of made me feel like were flaws. So I was probably like 12 or 13 or something when I kind of started just like doing stuff in my room, like running in place in my room and jumping jacks in my room and leg lifts. And um, eventually, like a few years later, when I was probably like 17, I was dating a guy and he took me to like a real gym. And that was like the end of it. Like that was, I was sold. I was into it. I don't even know what it was, or like I had no clue what I was doing. Bench press for the first time in my life, but for some reason I just loved it. And that at that same gym, I started actually working there, probably like a year after that or something. And I didn't really know what I was doing to train people, but the job that I had was like, back then they had people that were like salespersons and trainers. So my job was kind of to sell memberships, but then also when I sold a membership, I was supposed to like take people's body fat and take them around to machines and stuff like that. So it's kind of like I was almost like forced to learn in that way. And then there were lots of other people that worked there that were obviously more experienced and stuff like that, and kind of started, I guess, maybe noticing like that I was, really into this and wanted to learn. So I started, picking up things from other people and stuff. And like even in college, I worked at the gym in college. I worked like for the intramural office and stuff like that. So it's like I just threw myself into it, not really having a goal necessarily, but I just liked that world.
Yeah, kind of wanted to be a part of it.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating how so many people find that motivation or the drive from something that happens in their childhood. It's like
Yeah.
it's like we're trying to constantly prove to our younger selves like that we can actually like become this version of ourselves that we set to
Yeah.
be one day. It's crazy how much that really does push so many different people.
Yeah. Well, it's like my parents like noticed that I had like an interest in music. And so they signed me up for piano lessons, and I did like choir and all this stuff. And that was like my main sort of activity. But so they didn't really push me into sports or anything. And so that wasn't really something that I was exposed to necessarily. But then like as I became more of like a teenager and like people were sporty and doing more things like that, it kind of like made me aware that I hadn't really done that yet. So it's kind of like that you kind of like want the stuff that you don't have or something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the grass is always greener.
Mm-hmm.
But, once you kind of got exposed to the world of fitness in general, what pushed you, what opened your eyes, I guess, to bodybuilding?
So I'm sure you've heard people say this before, like somebody, you're just like working out. I had been, from the time that I started hitting the gym to my first show was 10 years. So I'd been lifting weights and just being a gym person for that amount of time before somebody, maybe a little bit less than that, before somebody just came up to me and asked me if I competed. And that's what happens to a lot of people. And people are like, what are you talking about? Especially back then, this was like the early 2000s, late 90s. Competing was not a huge thing like it is now. Obviously there wasn't Instagram and Facebook and all the ways you can find out about it and stuff. But people, like a few people just had asked me that. And one of my really good friends took me to a show. And that was like my first exposure to competing, period. And back then for women, it was bodybuilding, fitness, and figure. and that was it. And figure had just started at that time. And so I decided that I wanted to do fitness, because to me that seemed fun, doing like a routine. And I had like my 1 year of cheerleading. So I was sure that, I could put something together. But that was the first show, the first exposure to it was just getting into fitness, the fitness part of it. And then the whole diet thing, the same guy that took me to the show was the one that like did my diet. There wasn't online coaches and all that kind of stuff, but he was like really experienced with bodybuilding. He had never competed himself, but he had the knowledge as far as like what I needed to eat and all that kind of stuff. And I was clueless. And I think like at that time I was actually a vegetarian for like a couple of years, because I had seen a chicken truck full of chickens. And I didn't know that like the chicken you buy at the store was like these cute little white, fluffy, feathery things. And I was like, so sad when I saw it. And so for like a couple of years, I would eat like shrimp, but I wouldn't eat like chicken or beef or anything like that. And he was like, you're going to have to, start eating chicken and stuff again. So I was like, well, okay. So I went back to it.
All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here just for a second. Let me tell you about Smoking Gun Coffee. They're a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to produce a quality coffee at an affordable price. They only buy coffee from small coffee farmers around the world with a cup score of at least 85. Each batch is roasted to order for maximum freshness. They also donate a large portion of their proceeds to organizations that help local communities, veterans, first responders, or you can donate to the foundation of your choice at the checkout by going to www.smokingguncoffee.com. That's SMOKIN Gun Coffee. Going through that initial experience to get to be part of a show, to get on stage, like what kind of mindset change did that kind of put on you? Because obviously just going to the gym and working out is so much different than actually like getting ready, prepping for a show.
Yeah. So the stage part didn't bother me at all, because I had been I played the piano for all these years, done like recitals in the piano. I've sang in church. I was actually in theater in high school. So like just the whole being on stage and spotlights on me, that was like, okay, that's my element. That's what I love. And I don't think that I really don't even feel like I knew what I was getting into necessarily, to even know, like, I didn't know how I was going to feel like competing against other people, like being on stage. I didn't know if I was going to win or if I was going to lose, or if I was going to look good, or I didn't have a clue about really anything. So I feel like now I'm probably way harder and way more critical of myself than I was back then. Because back then I didn't know what I was getting into. I was just doing something that people told me I would probably be good at and just following my friends' directions, to get ready for it. And I feel like now it's not necessarily harder, because I know a whole lot more about what I'm doing and a whole lot more about what to expect. But there's a lot more scary parts about like for the Olympia, for example, like I know who's going to be there. I know what these people look like. I know what they've looked like in prior years. And that part is way more intimidating and scary than the first show.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I actually just talked to somebody about that very thing of like, that first show, it was almost just, it's the initial experience. You're not sure what to expect. You're not sure. You kind of go in with this idea of, I'm not supposed to like know what's going on. I'm not supposed to necessarily be the best person out there. I'm not supposed to like have any kind of idea of what it's going to feel like or what is going to happen next. And so it's all kind of like this new adventure. It probably goes by sometimes a little quicker when things are newer, so you don't kind of sit in that moment as long. And once that second one happens, you kind of know like, okay, this is going to happen at this point. They're going to call us up at this point. Then we're going to do this. And you kind of have these ideas of like what's supposed to happen. Okay, I've seen myself compared to these other people. this is about where I should stand. And then you think,
Yeah.
well, what if I don't stand in that position? What if I, what if, and then, so there's so many, I feel like more thoughts of like uncertainty about living up to expectations because those expectations have kind of been set by that first show.
Yeah. And even, I mean, it was probably, I don't know what number show it was that I didn't even know until that point that like when they call out the first 5 people, those are your top 5. Like when you're sitting in the center, your first place, that was not in my head at all. It was just like surprise.
It's just coincidence every time.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's just so much more out there now than, I mean, I cannot imagine what it would be like competing for the first time now, because you've got so many coaches, like so many different companies that are there, to tan you. I didn't even tan for my first show because I was just tan from the sun. I didn't even need a spray tan. And I thought it was crazy that people were like getting painted and all that stuff. And because they didn't have, the companies that did it back then either. But that, that's just like one of those things. It's like you learn like piece by piece back then. And now it's just like, okay, this, you do this, and this, and a lot more guidance, probably a lot more overwhelming now too.
Yeah. It definitely is, I feel like, a bigger world now.
Mm-hmm.
So like kind of going to that point though, how did it feel getting into it back then? Like not just yourself, but like the expectations from other people, like what other people thought because of you, getting into this. Were there any kind of like negative people out there like, hey, you shouldn't be doing this, it's unsafe, it's unhealthy, like anything like that?
I don't remember anybody being negative. I feel like I had like mostly supportive people, even like my like work people were would like come to my shows and stuff. So I feel like probably I've never been on such the extreme end, like especially like, like women's bodybuilding. I'm, close to women's bodybuilding now, but I'm still not to the extreme that a lot of people go to. So I hadn't probably entered that realm, as far as like people being like super critical or anything like that. But yeah, I feel like for the most part, like I've just had support. And probably, I don't know, like maybe like even at my job now, I feel like people don't necessarily even know that I compete. It's just not especially because I work from home, but like it's just not anything that people are necessarily to like talk about, I guess. Everybody at my gym, I feel like, obviously knows that I compete and stuff. I will say this though, I can always tell like when I'm getting close to a show, because that's when I start to look, like you obviously look leaner, you look more cut. And that's when I do start to feel like more people looking at me or something like that. And sometimes it feels like a good look. And then sometimes it feels like, but I don't ever feel like it's from somebody that's like my friend or like my family or anything. It'd be like more of a stranger or something like that. And I even like recently heard some like, I don't know, teenager kind of kids like overhearing them saying like, she must be on steroids or something like that. And I'm just like, ah. Like, I'm like, you don't say that, like you don't, like that'd be like me coming over and saying, you had too many milkshakes or something. It's just like, you don't assume anything about anybody or judge anything. So that's sort of like not the answer to your question, but like that's the thing that, if anything bothers me, that would be something like that.
Gotcha. So still kind of sticking back in time a little bit, like after that first show, did you have that feeling of like being hooked, or did it take a few more to be like, okay, this is actually something I can see myself doing kind of long term?
I think I was hooked. Like I don't ever remember not planning to do a competition. The only time so I competed, that was my first show was in 2002. And then I competed through 2007. And that's when I met my husband and we like got married and started having kids and stuff. The only time when I took a break really from competing was during that time when we obviously like pregnant, you're not gonna be competing. But after I had my two kids, we actually both got into CrossFit. So that was had like a little bit of a hiatus doing that too. But like probably maybe 3 or 4 years of CrossFit, and then I was kind of like, you know what? I still have the bug. I was doing CrossFit competitions, but it wasn't the same as competing on stage. And so I had sort of told myself, I can't remember, like when the kids were young, like that eventually I would, get back on stage. And so I did.
Did anything help you like kind of boost your bodybuilding game that you got from CrossFit?
Definitely. I would say almost everything. Like strength wise, I'd never gone for like PRs or anything like that. So knowing like how much I can lift, CrossFit taught me better form, because that's like a huge focus in CrossFit. And then like the intensity of workouts, like I thought that I had worked out hard before, but I knew after doing CrossFit, like I can push myself way harder. And I definitely still use like all those things still, like, and I'll even sometimes still do like a CrossFit workout just for the hell of it.
And as far as like being a competitor in each one, is there any kind of comparison between the meticulousness and the crazy attention to detail that bodybuilding has, or is there kind of any of that in CrossFit as well, as far as just like the every single thing matters?
When I did CrossFit competitions, I would say that I was not, I was serious, but I was not serious to the point where I was caring about my diet necessarily. I think that's probably the main difference as far as like the extremes of the two go. When you're doing bodybuilding, like you have to have everything in place if you want to win. I feel like when you're doing CrossFit, it's almost like a little bit opposite in the diet. Like you need more fuel, you need more food. Like you're not going to starve yourself for a month to get ready for a CrossFit competition. So the mindset of being a competitive and wanting to win is the same, but like the approach is really different.
This podcast is sponsored by Smoking Gun Coffee, a veteran-owned coffee company that strives to give back to those in need. Don't forget to use code TWR10 for a 10% discount at checkout.
And then when you got back into bodybuilding, what did you notice, some of the differences being after, a few years of taking a break from it?
I noticed that I think I had put on some muscle, but I'd also put on some fat. So like for my first show back, the main thing that I had to do was get lean again. I hadn't been lean, like really lean in a while. And I sort of feel like when I did that, I also probably lost a little bit of muscle too. So it's kind of like that first show was almost like getting back into the game. And then all the shows after that have been like making like progress every time, trying to gain a little bit more muscle and then trying to stay somewhat lean so that we don't have to go crazy peeling the fat off.
Right. And, speaking to that a little bit, how is that for you to kind of manage that idea of like, stepping on stage, even though, you compare yourself now to comparing yourself, 5 years ago or whatever, like, even though you might have improved every show, in some aspects, like even on that show where you're not as good as you are today, like that still was at a very peak level, So
Yeah.
How do you kind of like manage this idea of that's just for a very short period of time, and now I'm going to have to kind of get out of that to make progress?
This year has actually been the most extreme version of that, because for the most part, I don't ever put on a ton of fat, and I've always done cardio. Like that's always sort of been my thing. This year, I have a new coach, and she had me stop cardio. And that, at first, I didn't know if I'd be able to do it, but it actually was great. Like it was like, I really felt like I could focus on my weights. Like I went into the gym and that's all I was caring about. I wasn't caring about getting through my weights and then, oh God, I have to do cardio. I was like, I can spend all my effort on my weights. And I was surprised that since I was still eating clean and, you know, I was still in a calorie surplus, so I could try to gain some muscle, but like I didn't gain that much fat. And I never always thought I had to do cardio to keep the the fat bug away or whatever. It was like a huge learning experience. My body is, I think, kind of naturally lean, and it takes a lot of effort for me to put on muscle, like a lot. So the fact that I was doing cardio all these years was really probably hindering me to grow. And then there's like people that are the opposite. They're like, they can put on muscle like nobody's business, but then it's when it comes to losing fat, they struggle. So it's like, I'm not sure. Sometimes I feel like I wish I was the person that was like bigger naturally, but then I still know, like, I don't really struggle to get lean, but I know it's still hard. So I couldn't imagine being the person who really struggles to get lean.
Going from just competing to like wanting to compete to actually win and then winning, you know, how has staying both in the moment, but also keeping your eye on the, you know, the long-term goal, like how do you kind of balance both of those things?
So, you know, like when you're first competing, everybody's goals sort of is like, get your pro card. And then, so everybody's sort of like kind of, well, I'm going to try this show. I'm going to do this show. I'm going to do this show to get my pro card. And then say like you win at a local show. Like my first show back, I think I got 6th or something in the open, and then like 2nd or 3rd in masters, which to me was terrible from where I had like from 10 years before that. But that kind of like made me want to work harder, and it made me want to figure out like what I needed to do to get better. Sometimes it makes you feel like maybe I should just quit or something, but then like that's like me. That's just like a thought for a second. But I think that when like before I got my pro card, it was kind of like I wasn't necessarily I have to get my pro card. I just wanted to do my best, which sounds like really generic, but that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to get better. But then I also sort of like started to think better like about myself, like tell myself I was going to win, like picture myself winning. And I feel like that really made a big difference. Just like when I would go to sleep, like imagining myself with the trophy. And then like, once I got my pro card, I've like read where people say, you know, like when you're doing well in nationals and you're, you know, about to get your pro card, you're like at the top of your game, kind of like in that arena. And then once you get your pro card, you're like a tiny fish in a big sea again. But I sort of feel that way, especially going to the Olympia. But then I also feel like everything is easier now because there's only a handful of pro shows. Like there's either you go and you just see how well you do against other pros, or you go and you win and you go to the Olympia, or you just don't do anything, I guess. You know, like there's not like that much more if unless you're doing it for your job. It's not my job. So for me, this is like my hobby, and I'm at the top. I'm a professional athlete in bodybuilding, you know? So it's like, this is kind of like more relieving now. And I don't have to, I feel like I do have to push myself harder because I'm at a higher level, but everything that's happening is still like very, like to me seems like prestigious and stuff. Like when you go to a pro bodybuilding show, there's a very small percentage of the world that's doing that. So it's still like an accomplishment, even if you're last place or something, it's still like really cool.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's one of the things that people kind of forget in this world of fitness and bodybuilding is that even though when you're in it, it seems like it's this whole world and it's the whole world, there's just like such a small percentage of people who even go to the gym, you know, and then an even smaller percentage of people who do bodybuilding, and then even a smaller percentage of people who are, you know, pro bodybuilders. And even fraction of a percentage of people who, you know, step on the Olympia stage. So I think, you know, keeping that perspective, I think is actually a pretty cool thing, that appreciating where you are, how far you've come, you know, the place that you are in, because, you know, it's still a lot of work. It's still so much, you know, time and effort and energy and discipline. So yeah, I think that's actually a really cool thing to think about.
Yeah. Like my first show was 2002 and it's 2022. So like, if you don't count the time that I kind of took off, like this has been 20 years sort of in the making or whatever. And, you know, there's people that I could be their mom that I'm going to be competing against. And there's like people that take like the super fast road. That's like, they're 18, they get their pro card when they're 20, they're on the Olympia stage when they're 21 or whatever. That's, you know, cool too. But for me, I feel like I wouldn't have known what to do with myself. Like I would, I needed the slow road.
I think that's what a lot of people don't appreciate anymore, though, is like that good things do take time a lot of times.
Yeah.
And even if you're not one of those people who, you know, can achieve this great, crazy, you know, victories in short amount of time in 2 or 3 years, like it's still possible, and it's still probably worth it to at least try, because in the process of doing all this stuff for bodybuilding, you know, you develop so much outside of bodybuilding as well, to, you know, that you can apply outside of bodybuilding.
Yeah, that's kind of like what I want to get out of this whole thing, is if I can like motivate just a handful of people to like realize that they can do something, you know, like they can get their pro card, they can go to the Olympia or whatever. Like it just takes time for the most part. So
yeah, no, I think that's something that, like I said, we're kind of losing that idea, and bodybuilding is one of those things to where the body is for most people, it's not this quick responsive thing. And even if it is, like, if you want to be good in this sport for a long time, even if you're very successful early, you know, you still have a lot of potential years left, you know, so, you know, learning how to appreciate, you know, every single day and every single meal and every single, you know, exercise that you're doing in the gym, like all of these things, they build upon each other, and that 1% each day and that kind of thing. I think it's really, really cool, the lessons that we learn in fitness and bodybuilding, and how we can, you know, apply them to life. But, you know, speaking of kind of about that, as you've gained more success in this sport, you know, what do you feel like has been, and maybe it's not one thing specifically, but what do you feel like has been kind of that, you know, that thing that whether it's learning how to, you know, learning how to recover better, or learning that this food works better for me, or this kind of eating style works better for me, or this kind of training, you know, this way works better for me. Like, what do you feel like has taken you to that next level?
I would say like this year, like what I was saying earlier about the stopping cardio, that had to have made the biggest difference, because I can tell that I've gained some size. I didn't die from not doing cardio. So it like helped my just realization, I guess, because people used to call me like the cardio queen or something, because I was just on the stairs running, whatever. I think it has had its benefits, because I still think like running and cycling and stuff like that, like my legs are probably my best part, and there's no way that they got there just from lifting weights. Like I know that the cardio had something to do with it, because of like how hard I pushed on a lot of that stuff. But I would say that, and then the funny thing is like the diet part. This just happens just because of like experience. Like I can eat more now than I could, you know, years ago, just because my body's like become accustomed to it, gotten more muscular, whatever. But my diet is not really that different. My diet has never really changed. Just the amounts of food. So I feel like the food part for me is kind of like the easiest part. It's the training I've had like a couple of surgeries. Like I tore my ACL and tore my posterior labrum in my shoulder. So part of the mental aspect for me for like going like heavier on my weights and stuff is a little bit like sometimes like a little bit scared because I don't want to like tear anything or hurt anything anymore. So that's something that I kind of have to maneuver around as far as like being brave in the gym. But I think I've gotten better at that this year too, just going, like the progressive overload, like when you're just adding a little bit each week or whatever, and listening to your bodies. That'd probably be like the main thing, listening to your body so you don't get hurt.
Yeah. I think a lot of people, especially early on, kind of struggle with listening and actually caring a lot of times what it's saying, because it's sometimes easy to hear it but hard to, it's like taking advice from yourself. It's like nobody can really do that. And that's the same thing with your body. It's like, oh, you can easily tell a friend like, hey, if this hurts your shoulder when you do it, don't do it. But if if it's you, then it's like, oh, I can do it. I can push past it. I'll get the rep in, and then something happens.
Well, it's like I'm supposed to do this or something, but you're not supposed to get hurt.
Right. Yeah, for sure. What do you think it is, not just in your situation, but like in just like in general, that takes a person from this pro level to the next level of like being the Olympia athlete?
The main thing is like dedication to what you're doing. Like you cannot just do this Monday, Wednesday, Friday. It's every single day. Like eat, sleep, breathe. You can still have a life. I'm not sure if the like top whatever like I feel like everybody's got a life. Like when you see like people on Instagram, it seems like people have a life. But I think that I guess like the higher level and the more experienced you are, then like the more help you have. So that probably kind of helps to have a life. But like there's like no cutting corners. There's no like I'll do this tomorrow. If you're supposed to do something today, you've got to do it today. I think that's like the main difference. The thing that I struggle with a little bit is that when I got my Olympia qualification, I was the only person at the show. So I didn't beat anybody to get there. So when I am there, that's really going to be like the first time when I'm being compared against these like top athletes. So that's like the most nerve-wracking and scary thing for me at this point. And I'm doing one show before that in Baltimore in October, but those people aren't going to the Olympia. So it's I'm hoping if I don't win that show, then I'm gonna be scared, really scared.
That's I think the crazy part about bodybuilding is like it all depends on who shows up that day,
Exactly.
Whether it's the competitor or the judge. You don't have this like, it's not a standardized who's gonna win.
And when I was the only person at the shows, the Ben Weider Natural Pro, and it's the only drug tested Olympia qualification show. I kind of like, they kept saying like, post on Instagram, like getting ready for the show, like, and me and my friends would see, like a bunch of figure people, a bunch of wellness people, a bunch of bikini people or whatever, and never like a women's physique person. So I was just like pretty much certain that I was going to be the only person there. At some point it was kind of like getting so close to the show that it was like, so I had in my head, like, I have to be better than even what I want to be, because I don't want to go there and be the only person there and get a qualification for the Olympia and not look the part. So that like lit a fire under me, which sounds crazy because nobody else was going to be there. But I'm like, I have to represent,
right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. It's definitely an interesting perspective too, to have like this idea of nobody else is going to be there, because a lot of people would be the opposite, be like, okay, well, I can kind of take it easy, put it on cruise control. But I think that's kind of a really cool mindset to have, is that like, even though nobody else is going to be there, I want to make sure that I deserve this, that,
Yeah.
I would still be the winner, even if there were, 20 other people here. I think that's a really
Right.
cool kind of way to go about it.
Yeah. And I feel like that it wasn't like obviously the hardest show to compete at because I wasn't, but it was weird walking out on stage and like doing my poses by myself, I mean, which you go out there and do your presentation by yourself, but just having the judge call the poses and I'm the only person up there. Like, that was a first.
What do you kind of have in store for, for the Olympia stage?
Definitely adding a little bit of size. I've done that. I can get really lean, but I'm planning to get leaner. Just because I think that when you're smaller, you kind of have to be leaner. Like the goal would be to get leaner earlier and then sort of be able to fill out a little, like be able to eat a little bit more to look fuller. I've been working on posing with a new posing coach too. You walk out there, you have to look confident, you have to know what you're doing. And then if you don't hit your pose right, that looks good on your body, then that can make the difference between first place and last place.
Right.
In some cases, having the experience of being on stage, there's things that I learned just from like watching videos of me being on stage. Like you can't relax at all. Like you need to look relaxed, but you cannot relax. So it's like just thinking about all those things. Like I try to I mean I'm thinking about it really all the time, but just thinking about being on stage, like what am I going to look like, preparing just mentally. You can't just be in the gym and you can't just eat. You've got to like picture yourself and just imagine yourself being there. So like when you're there, it's like you've been there before or something.
Yeah. No, I think that's really a powerful thing. You kind of mentioned it earlier too, kind of like visualization and kind of using the mind to your advantage. A lot of times I think in higher level sports it's utilized, but a lot of times it's not, it's forgotten. It's like, you just go out there and move your body around and see what happens. But the mind is a very
That's
powerful
what like freaks
tool.
me out about like some people, like a lot of people are really talented and they can just go and like free pose or something. I would never. I mean, I would sort of trust myself to do that, but I would never do it just because I want to be like fully prepared. I mean, things can happen, like your music could be wrong. So you kind of have to think about bad things happening too, which I probably don't do enough. But, like if they start the wrong song or something like that. But like people have said before, like, if they start playing the wrong song, just go, just keep going. I'm not doing that. I'm not like, and that's happened to me before. Like the song, my song started like, I don't know, 10 or 15 seconds in or something. And I was just like, no, let's start all over, because you don't work months and months and months, like coming up with a routine, practicing a routine to have the DJ like screw it up. I mean, kudos to people that would, do a routine to the wrong song or whatever. But the routine part technically doesn't matter. It's not judged in women's physique, but still, like, that's like one of my favorite parts of the show is like coming out and presenting this routine to the audience. So
kind of looking ahead after you're done kind of competing and being in this world of bodybuilding on a competitive side, do you still hope to kind of be a part of it in any way?
Yeah, but I don't plan to stop. I told my friends I'm going to compete till I'm dead. They like are bringing back the Masters Olympia next year, and I don't know all the details on it, but I figure like this, not to be like negative, I figured this is probably the best and maybe only shot I have at being on the real Olympia stage. Who knows? Maybe I'll like surprise everyone, surprise myself, be in the top 5. Let's just say that. But a more realistic goal, because of my age, I think would be maybe to try the Masters Olympia. And I'm assuming that would be like, there's tons of Masters pro shows, and there's the people that compete at them really don't get anything out of it. It's just like if you win, you get prize money, but there's no qualification for anything. So I'm hoping that that's the route that takes. And like when you compete in Masters Pro, then you go to the Masters Olympia. So that's what I feel like, unless I shock the world. That's what I kind of like see myself doing, but I don't see myself stopping competing. But if I did stop competing, I don't see myself being like a coach or anything like that necessarily, but I don't see how I could get out of it. I feel like I would have to be involved some way. I've stoned my own suits before, things like that. I don't know if I would want to be like, get into that part of it, or just maybe like, I don't know, maybe they'll invent a new coach that's like just not a diet coach, but like advice coach or something for competing.
Like a bodybuilding hotline for advice.
Yeah. If you feel like you're going to have a cheat meal and you're not supposed to, call me and I'll talk you down.
I mean, heck, that could be a thing for real. I'd, keep the idea. I mean, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, there's coaches for everything else. So
really, yeah, it's like a little emotional support coach.
Yeah,
that'd be funny.
Because I feel like a lot of coaches think and do have that as part of their job, but they can't. I mean, they can't be with you all the time, and a lot of people probably don't even tell their coach a lot of times how they're feeling and stuff like that. So they might need a second party.
Exactly. I mean, heck, that actually could be a pretty good idea, but that was really cool getting to talk to you. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.